She wasn't crying because she was afraid to die. She was crying because something smaller than her was dying first. The sound came from beneath the old Mill Creek Bridge just after midnight, thin and broken, almost swallowed by the wind that swept down from the Montana hills and rattled the frozen guardrails like loose bones. Staff Sergeant Caleb Walker heard it through the closed window of his pickup while the heater coughed warm air against the windshield and the road ahead vanished under a white curtain of falling snow. At first, he thought it was the bridge itself. Old steel made strange noises in winter. Wood groaned. Ice cracked. Wind found every gap and turned it into a whistle. But then it came again. Not a whistle. Not metal. A cry. Caleb eased his foot off the gas. The tires rolled over packed snow with a soft crunch, and for one long second, he kept moving, the way people did when the weather was bad and the hour was late, and stopping meant trouble. A pair of taillights disappeared half a mile ahead, another driver hurrying toward warm rooms and locked doors. Caleb's hands tightened on the wheel. He had been coming back from a veterans memorial in Helena, still wearing his dark coat over a plain white shirt, the small silver Marine Corps pin cold against his chest. He was 37, broad-shouldered, pale-skinned from a winter spent mostly indoors, with close-cut dark brown hair and eyes the color of storm clouds over open water. People said he looked steady. They were right, mostly. He knew how to stand still when sirens screamed. He knew how to speak calmly when others panicked. He knew how to bury fear so deep it came back only at night. But there were sounds a man never forgot. A voice over a radio. A breath turning weak. Someone asking not to be left behind. Caleb touched the brake. The truck slid an inch, caught, then stopped beside the bridge. Snow tapped against the hood. The creek below moved black and slow between shelves of ice, its surface broken by jagged white plates that knocked gently against the concrete supports. The old bridge had been built in the 1940s, a narrow two-lane crossing with rusted beams and a service path few people used anymore. In daylight, it looked tired. At night, under snow, it looked abandoned by the world. Caleb turned off the engine. Silence rushed in. Then the cry rose again from below. Softer this time. Tired. Alive. He stepped out, and the cold hit him hard enough to steal his first breath. The air smelled of frozen mud, wet iron, pine smoke from distant houses, and something sharper beneath it, the clean, cruel scent of ice. He pulled a flashlight from the glove box, clicked it on, and walked toward the rail. The beam cut through the snow in a narrow cone, catching flakes like sparks before dropping into the darkness below. "Hello?" he called, though he already knew no human voice would answer. The cry stopped. Caleb leaned over the railing. At first, he saw only shadows under the bridge, the black ribs of steel, the concrete pillar, the creek pressing around it. Then the beam found two amber eyes. They did not blink. A German shepherd stood half-hidden beneath the span, her body pressed against a concrete support, her sable coat crusted with snow and river ice. She was female, full-grown, maybe 6 years old, lean in the way working dogs were lean, though now too thin beneath the fur. One ear stood straight, the other bent slightly at the tip. A strip of old nylon hung loose around her neck, and a short chain ran from it to something buried behind the pillar. She was not barking. She was not lunging. She was shivering so hard the chain trembled with her, making a faint metallic tick against the frozen concrete. Caleb's stomach dropped. "Easy, girl," he said, voice low. The dog's eyes stayed fixed on him, not wild, not empty, but guarded with the weary discipline of an animal trained to endure. That was what unsettled him most. She did not look like a stray. She looked like a soldier who had run out of orders, but not out of duty. Caleb moved toward the service path, boots sliding on the snow-packed gravel. The descent was steep, rimmed with ice, and the railing ended halfway down where weeds stuck through the frost like brittle wire. He kept one hand on the beam and lowered himself carefully, the flashlight clenched between his teeth for a few steps until the path flattened beneath the bridge. The cold changed down there. It became damp, close, trapped. Water murmured inches away, dark and patient. The bridge above gave a low groan as wind passed through it. The shepherd watched him come, head lowered, breath puffing white from her muzzle. When Caleb got within 10 feet, she gave a warning sound, not a growl exactly, more like a plea trying to become one. He stopped at once and crouched in the snow. "I hear you," he whispered. "I'm not going to hurt you." The dog shifted, and Caleb saw her right hind leg tremble under her weight. There was mud frozen into the fur around her paws. No fresh blood, no open injury he could see. Just exhaustion, exposure, and the chain holding her close to the pillar while the creek climbed slowly around the stones below. He reached into his coat pocket and found a protein bar from the memorial hall, still wrapped, slightly crushed. He opened it, broke off a small piece, and placed it on the ground between them. The dog sniffed once, but did not move toward it. Instead, she turned her head toward the darkness behind the pillar. Caleb followed her gaze. Nothing there but shadow, a low hollow beneath the concrete where runoff had carved a space over the years. He lifted the flashlight. The shepherd stepped sideways, blocking the beam with her body. Not aggressive, protective. Caleb felt the old ache stir under his ribs. "What are you guarding?" he asked softly. The dog looked back at him then, and something in her face changed. Her ears eased. Her mouth opened just enough for another faint cry to escape. Not for herself. Caleb understood that before he understood anything else. He took off his gloves, because bare fingers worked better with knots, and moved closer inch by inch. The chain was looped through a rusted anchor bolt, the clasp stiff with ice. The shepherd flinched when he reached for it, then froze, fighting every instinct to pull away. "Brave girl," Caleb said. His fingers burned almost immediately. The metal bit into his skin with a cold so clean it felt like fire. He worked the clasp once, twice, failed, breathed through his teeth, and tried again. Above them, a truck crossed. The bridge, tires humming over frozen boards. Snow shook loose and fell in a soft white sheet around them. The dog did not look up. She kept staring into the hollow behind the pillar. Caleb finally freed the chain. It dropped with a dull clink into the snow. "There," he whispered. "You're loose." But the shepherd did not run. She did not step toward the open path. She turned, weak and shaking, and dragged herself toward the dark space beneath the concrete, then looked back at Caleb as if giving him the only command she had left. "Follow." The shepherd moved only a few feet before her strength nearly failed. Her front paws slid on the ice-glazed mud, and her shoulders struck the concrete with a hollow sound that made Caleb's breath catch. He reached for her, but she twisted her head back, not with anger, not even with fear, only with urgency. The hollow beneath the bridge was darker than the rest of the night, a narrow space tucked behind the pillar where the wind could not reach cleanly and the snow had blown in sideways. Caleb lowered himself to one knee and angled the flashlight past her. At first, the beam found nothing but wet stone, old leaves trapped in ice, and a torn strip of green canvas wedged between two chunks of broken concrete. Then something moved. Small, almost too small for the eye to trust. Caleb leaned closer, and the cold inside his chest became something else entirely. 3 puppies lay bundled together inside a faded military duffel bag, their bodies no larger than his hands, their fur damp and clumped, their eyes still sealed against the world. One was sable like the mother. One was darker across the back, with a pale mark under the chin. The smallest lay partly beneath the others, still enough that Caleb had to stare for a second before seeing the faint rise of its ribs. The shepherd gave a low, broken sound and pressed her muzzle toward them, unable to reach because of the weakness in her legs. Caleb did not speak for a moment. Words would have been too loud down there. The creek murmured beside them. Snow whispered through the steel above. Somewhere far off, a truck engine faded into the hills, leaving the bridge and the dog and the 3. Tiny breaths alone again. "That is what you would not leave," Caleb said at last. His voice came out rough, almost unfamiliar to him. The shepherd blinked once, slow and exhausted, as if the question had already cost her more than she had left. Caleb pulled his coat open and tugged off the wool scarf he had worn to the memorial. It still carried the warmth of his neck. Carefully, he reached into the hollow. The mother stiffened, watching every movement. "I know," he whispered. "I know. I am going to be careful." The first puppy made a sound like a hiccup when Caleb lifted it. So faint he felt it more than heard it. He wrapped it in the scarf and tucked it against his shirt. The second pup squirmed weakly, mouth opening without a cry. The third, the smallest, was cold in a way that made Caleb move faster while forcing his hands to stay gentle. He gathered all 3 close beneath his coat, holding them against the heat of his body. The shepherd leaned forward, nose trembling, counting them by scent. 1, 2, 3. Only then did she let her head drop. Caleb saw something else in the duffel bag beneath where the puppies had been. A laminated photograph, cracked across one corner, stuck to the wet canvas. He pulled it free with 2 fingers and turned it toward the flashlight. The image was blurred by water damage, but not ruined. A younger Marine stood outside a kennel yard, smiling in winter sunlight, one arm around the same German shepherd when her coat was fuller, her eyes brighter, her body proud and strong. On the back, written in permanent marker that had bled slightly at the edges, were the words Ryan and Sable, never leave family behind. Caleb read the line once. Then again. The name struck him in a place memory had kept locked for years. Ryan. Not enough to place fully, not yet, but enough to make the air feel thinner. He slipped the photo into his shirt pocket and looked at the dog. Sable, he said softly. The shepherd's ears twitched. It was small, barely there, but it was recognition. Her name still lived somewhere beneath the cold. Caleb swallowed hard. All right, Sable. We are getting your family out. He slid one arm under her chest and the other behind her hind legs. She was lighter than she should have been. Working dogs carried muscle, history, purpose. This one carried all of that, but hunger and winter had taken their share. When he lifted her, she did not resist. Her head turned immediately toward Caleb's coat, toward the small bundle hidden against his body. Even then, half frozen and barely standing inside herself, she was still checking the puppies. The climb back to the road was harder than the descent. Caleb had one arm full of dog and 3 lives pressed beneath his coat. His boots slipped twice on the icy path. The first time, he caught himself against a beam with his shoulder. The second time, he dropped to one knee and held Sable higher so she would not strike the ground. Pain flashed up his leg, sharp but clean. He ignored it. Above him, the truck waited with its hazard lights blinking amber through the snowfall, each pulse appearing and vanishing like a heartbeat in the storm. Almost there, he breathed. Stay with me, girl. Sable's head rested against his arm. Her eyes were half closed, but whenever one of the puppies shifted, her gaze opened again. At the top, Caleb leaned against the guardrail, lungs burning, hands numb, shirt damp from melted snow and puppy warmth. He opened the back door of the truck and laid Sable across the folded blanket he kept behind the seat. Then he placed the puppies beside her one by one. The change in her was immediate. Not strength exactly, something deeper. She curled around them with the last of her body, nose moving over each tiny shape, drawing them in beneath her chin. Caleb turned the heater high and angled the vents toward the back. Warm air filled the cab, carrying the smell of wet fur, old canvas, cold metal, and living breath. He pulled out his phone. One bar of service flickered, disappeared, then returned. He dialed the closest emergency veterinary clinic listed from a roadside sign he had passed 2 miles back. The call rang 4 times. 5. Caleb stared through the windshield at the frozen bridge, at the black mouth beneath it where no one would have looked if not for one thin cry in the storm. A woman finally answered, her voice heavy, with sleep but alert enough to hear the fear beneath his calm. Foster Veterinary Care. Caleb closed his eyes for half a second. My name is Staff Sergeant Caleb Walker. I found a German Shepherd and 3 newborn pups under the Mill Creek Bridge. They are cold, weak, and one is barely breathing. I am 10 minutes out if the roads hold. There was a pause, then the woman's tone changed completely. Bring them in. I will be ready. Caleb started the engine. In the rearview mirror, Sable lifted her head, amber eyes catching the dashboard light. She looked at him not with gratitude yet, not with trust fully earned, but with a question. The same question every abandoned soul asks when the door finally opens. Are you really staying? Caleb put the truck in drive and turned onto the snow-covered road. I am not leaving, he said, and this time, he was not only speaking to the dog. The road to Foster Veterinary Care had never felt longer than 10 minutes. Caleb drove with both hands locked on the wheel, shoulders squared, eyes cutting through the snow as the headlights tunneled forward 1 white yard at a time. The storm had softened the world into shapes and shadows. Fence posts appeared and vanished. Pines leaned over the road, their branches heavy with snow. The yellow center line disappeared under packed ice, leaving Caleb to follow memory, instinct, and the faint black ribbon where tires had passed before him. In the back seat, Sable lay curled around the puppies, her body making a shelter even as tremors moved through her ribs. The heater blew hard, filling the cab with dry warmth, but the cold clung to them like something alive. Caleb kept glancing into the rearview mirror. Each time, Sable was watching him. Not steadily, not fully. Her eyes would close, then open again whenever the smallest puppy made that fragile little movement against her chest. Caleb had seen Marines stay awake for worse reasons. He knew that kind of refusal. It was not strength. It was love wearing the last shape it could find. "Hold on," he said, his voice quiet under the hum of the engine. "We are almost there." A mile marker flashed by on the right. Then another. The clinic sign appeared. At the edge of town, half buried in snow, its green letters glowing weakly beneath a porch light. Foster Veterinary Care. Caleb turned into the gravel lot too fast, corrected gently, and brought the truck to a stop near the front door. Before he could reach for his phone, the clinic lights snapped on inside. The door opened, spilling gold across the snow. A woman in jeans, rubber boots, and a heavy gray cardigan stepped out with a towel already in her arms. She was in her early 40s, pale-skinned, with auburn hair pulled into a loose knot and calm blue eyes that looked awake in the way emergency people became awake when lives were waiting. "Sergeant Walker?" she called through the storm. "Yes, ma'am. I am Dr. Emily Carter. Bring the puppies first." Caleb opened the rear door. Sable lifted her head and let out a low warning sound, weak but clear. Dr. Carter stopped where she was. She did not reach in. She did not rush. She looked at the shepherd and softened her voice. "I know, Mama. I know they are yours." Sable's lips closed. Her eyes stayed hard on the doctor, but the sound faded. Caleb slipped both hands inside his coat and brought out the scarf bundle, warm now on the outside, but frighteningly still within. Dr. Carter took it with the kind of care people use for old letters and newborn things. Her face changed when she felt the smallest pup. Inside. Now. Caleb lifted Sable next. The dog tried to stand when he touched her, as if pride still mattered, but her legs folded before they found the floorboard. "Easy," Caleb whispered. "You did your part." He carried her across the lot, while Dr. Carter pushed the door open with her shoulder. The clinic smelled of antiseptic, clean towels, old wood, and coffee left too long on a burner. It was small but orderly, with framed photographs of rescued animals on the walls and a brass bell above the door that trembled as the wind followed them in. Dr. Carter had already cleared the examination table and placed heating pads beneath thick blankets. Caleb laid Sable down first. The shepherd immediately tried to turn toward the puppies. "Let her see them," Caleb said. "She will fight us if she cannot see them." Dr. Carter nodded once. "Then we work around love, not against it." She placed the 3 puppies beside Sable's muzzle while checking them one by one. The first was cold but breathing. The second weaker but responsive. The third made no sound at all. Dr. Carter's hands moved quickly, not frantic, just precise. Warm towels, gentle rubbing, a small oxygen mask, a stethoscope pressed to a chest no bigger than a folded glove. Caleb stood near the table, snow melting from his sleeves, hands red from the cold, unable to look away. Sable lifted her head despite the effort it took and touched her nose to the smallest pup. Once, twice, as if calling it home from somewhere far away. Dr. Carter listened again. Her mouth tightened. "Come on, little one," she murmured. Caleb felt the words strike something old inside him. "Come on. Stay with me. Do not fade out." The room seemed to shrink around the sound of the heater and the tiny hiss of oxygen. Sable's body trembled, but she did not pull back. Dr. Carter examined the mother next without moving the puppies beyond her reach. "She is dehydrated. Low temperature. Exhausted. No severe external injuries that I can see right now, but that chain mark has been there for some time." Her voice remained gentle, but Caleb heard the anger buried beneath it, controlled and professional. "She is a trained dog." Caleb nodded. "I thought the same. No tag." "No, but I found this." He pulled the damaged photograph from his shirt pocket and held it out. Dr. Carter took it carefully. Her eyes moved over the image, then to the writing on the back. "Ryan and Sable never leave family behind." For a moment, the room held still. "Ryan Hale?" she said under her breath. Caleb looked up sharply. "You know that name?" Dr. Carter did not answer right away. She turned toward the computer near the counter, picked up a handheld microchip scanner, and brought it to Sable's shoulder. The shepherd watched, but did not resist. The scanner beeped. Dr. Carter entered the number with quiet urgency. Caleb heard each tap of the keys like a clock in an empty hallway. Then the file opened. Dr. Carter's face lost a little color. She read, aloud, slowly. K9 Sable. Female German Shepherd. Registered Handler, Corporal Ryan Hale. Military Working Dog Program, Transfer Record. Status inactive. Caleb gripped the edge of the table. The name was no longer distant. It had shape now. Snow. Radio static. A voice cutting in and out through a storm years earlier. Ryan Hale saying something Caleb had never been able to forget, though he had never understood it fully. Do not leave her. Caleb looked down at Sable. She was licking the smallest puppy with tired, steady strokes, as if the whole world had narrowed to that one fragile chest. Dr. Carter glanced at him. Sergeant. Caleb did not move. His eyes stayed on the dog, on the old photograph, on the line written in fading marker. I heard him once, he said, barely above a whisper. Ryan Hale. I heard his last call. Dr. Carter did not ask Caleb to explain right away. She had the wisdom of people who worked near fragile lives. Some wounds could not be opened while tiny lungs were still fighting for air. She only nodded once, then turned back to the table, where the smallest puppy lay beneath a warm towel with an oxygen mask resting gently over its face. The room held the kind of quiet that did not feel empty. It felt watchful. The wall clock ticked above the medicine cabinet. The heater rattled softly near the floor. Outside, the storm pressed snow against the windows until the glass looked milk-white and distant, as if the clinic had drifted away from the rest of Montana and become the only warm place left in the world. Caleb stood beside Sable, one hand resting near her shoulder, but not on it. He had learned long ago that trust was not something a person could take. It had to be offered, inch by inch. Sable's eyes moved between him and the puppy's. She was still wary of every sound, every metal tray, every footstep, but when Caleb spoke, her ears shifted toward him. Ryan told me not to leave her, he said. The words came out slowly, like they had been frozen inside him for years and were only now beginning to thaw. Dr. Carter looked up from the puppy, but kept her hands moving. Ryan Hale? Caleb nodded. It was in the mountains during a winter. Training support operation. Bad weather moved in faster than anyone expected. Radio traffic was broken. I was on relay duty that night. I was supposed to keep signals clear between teams. He swallowed and looked toward the window, where snow slid down the glass in thin white rivers. His call came through full of static. I could barely make out his voice. He said his unit was separated. He said visibility was gone. Then he said, do not leave her. Sable lifted her head a little higher. The movement was weak, but unmistakable. Caleb saw it and went still. Dr. Carter saw it too. She knows that sentence, the doctor whispered. Caleb's throat tightened. I thought he meant a person, a civilian, maybe a wounded Marine. I kept asking for coordinates. I kept asking who he meant. The storm kept eating the signal. He looked down at the dog. Then the line went quiet. The room seemed to grow colder despite the heat. Caleb could hear again what he had heard years ago, that thin voice under the storm, the broken radio tone, the helpless silence afterward. He had told himself 100 times that he had done his job. He had followed procedure. He had passed the call up. He had stayed at his station. No one had blamed him. No report had marked him responsible. But guilt did not always listen to paperwork. Sometimes it waited in the ribs, patient as winter. Dr. Carter checked Sable's temperature and adjusted the warm blankets around her. Records say Ryan Hale died during a weather-related service accident 6 years ago, she said gently. His K9 was listed as missing during transfer after the incident. There are notes, but they are incomplete. Caleb looked at the old photograph resting near the keyboard. Ryan's young face was blurred by water damage, but the smile remained bright enough to hurt. Sable in the picture looked strong, proud, her head lifted as if she knew exactly where she belonged. She was the one, Caleb said. He was asking us not to leave her. Sable exhaled, long and unsteady, then lowered her muzzle to the puppies again. The second puppy rooted weakly against the towel. The first gave a thin squeak that made Dr. Carter smile for half a second. The smallest did not move. Caleb watched the doctor's hand slow. She listened again with the stethoscope, her expression controlled but heavy. This little one is very weak, she said. I am not giving up, but I need you to understand. Caleb nodded, though he hated the shape of those words. Sable seemed to sense it before anyone spoke further. She shifted, trying to rise. Her front legs pushed against the blanket. Her body trembled under the effort. "No, Mama, stay down," Dr. Carter said softly. Sable ignored her. Not with defiance. With purpose. Caleb placed a hand near her chest, careful and steady. "Sable," he said. "Easy." The dog looked at him. For the first time, her eyes did not ask whether he would leave. They asked whether he would help her get closer. Caleb understood. He moved the smallest puppy nearer to her muzzle. Dr. Carter opened her mouth as if to object, then stopped. Some things in a clinic belong to medicine. Some belong to something older. Sable lowered her head until her nose touched the puppy's side. She breathed in, slow and trembling, then gave one gentle lick across the tiny chest. Nothing happened. She did it again. The room waited. Caleb realized he was holding his breath. Dr. Carter's hand rested lightly near the oxygen tube. The heater hummed. Snow struck the window in soft bursts. Sable gave a third lick, slower than the others, then pressed her nose against the puppy as if offering the last warmth she owned. Caleb thought of Ryan Hale in that storm, speaking through static, asking someone somewhere to remember what mattered. He thought of the bridge, the chain, the hollow in the concrete, the way Sable had blocked the flashlight until she knew he could be trusted. He thought of how long she must have carried that old command inside her. Never leave family behind. The puppy's paw twitched. It was so small Caleb almost missed it. Dr. Carter leaned in, eyes sharp. "Wait." The paw moved again. Then the little chest hitched beneath the towel. Once. Twice. A breath came out, thin as thread but real. Dr. Carter adjusted the oxygen mask and let out a sound that was not quite a laugh and not quite a sob. Caleb bowed his head, one hand gripping the edge of the table. Sable did not celebrate. She simply rested her muzzle beside the puppy and closed her eyes, as if she had been holding up the world and had finally been allowed to set it down for a moment. Caleb reached toward her, stopping just short of her fur. This time, Sable did not pull away, so he laid his hand gently on her shoulder. Beneath his palm, her body was still shaking, but she was warm, alive, still guarding. And in the quiet of that little clinic, with 3 puppies breathing beneath yellow light and an old promise returning from the snow, Caleb Walker felt something inside him loosen for the first time in 6 years. By dawn, the storm had weakened into a pale gray hush. Snow still fell beyond the clinic windows, but gently now, as if the night had spent all its anger and left only silence behind. Foster veterinary care glowed under the first light of morning, its small rooms warm with the steady pulse of machines, the soft rustle of towels, and the fragile sounds of newborn life. Caleb had not gone home. He sat in a wooden chair beside the recovery kennel, his coat hanging damp over the back, his sleeves rolled to the forearms, his hands wrapped around a paper cup of coffee he had forgotten to drink. Dr. Carter had given him a blanket sometime around 3 in the morning. It rested and used across his knees. He was too awake for comfort, too tired for sleep, caught somewhere between memory and mercy. Sable lay inside the kennel on a thick fleece pad, an intravenous line taped carefully to her foreleg, her 3 puppies tucked against her belly beneath a warming lamp. The smallest one, the one Dr. Carter had nearly lost, breathed in shallow but steady pulls, its tiny side rising and falling like a promise learning how to keep itself. Caleb watched that rise and fall more than he watched the clock. Every breath felt borrowed. Every breath felt holy. Sable had slept for only minutes at a time. Whenever a puppy stirred, her eyes opened. Whenever Caleb shifted in the chair, her gaze found him, not sharp the way it had been under the bridge, but measuring, cautious, less afraid. Trust did not arrive all at once. It came like morning in winter, slowly, almost shyly, touching one cold thing at a time. Dr. Carter stepped from the back room carrying a printed record and the old photograph sealed now inside a clear plastic sleeve. Her auburn hair had loosened around her face, and fatigue had softened her expression without weakening it. "I pulled what I could from the database," she said. Caleb looked up. "About Ryan?" She nodded and sat on the edge of the desk across from him. "Corporal Ryan Hale. Born in Idaho. Enlisted at 19. K-9 handler for 3 years. Sable was assigned to him after her first evaluation. Her record says she was unusually responsive to hand signals and scent tracking. Quiet dog. Strong recall. Protective, but not reactive. Caleb gave the faintest smile without meaning to. That sounds like her. Inside the kennel, Sable's ear twitched at the sound of her name. Dr. Carter continued, her voice low enough not to disturb the puppies. After the accident, she was supposed to be transferred to a rehabilitation unit, then placed with a handler or family. But the records after that are thin. A transport note, a receiving signature that was never completed. Then nothing. Caleb stared at the coffee in his hands. A dark ring had formed around the inside of the cup, so she disappeared between systems. That is what it looks like. Dr. Carter paused. It happens more than people want to believe. Not always from cruelty. Sometimes from carelessness. Paperwork. Overcrowding. Someone assuming someone else followed through. Caleb's jaw tightened. He looked toward Sable, at the faded line where a collar had pressed too long into her neck. Carelessness can feel the same as being abandoned. Dr. Carter did not argue. Outside, a snowplow passed on the road, its blade scraping pavement with a long metallic sigh. The puppies moved at the sound. Sable lifted her head, then settled only after all three quieted again. Caleb stood and took one slow step closer to the kennel. You made it through all that, he said softly. Sable watched him, amber eyes half-lidded but present. You made it through losing him. Through being passed along. Through whatever happened before that bridge. He stopped near the kennel door and crouched, careful not to crowd her. And you still kept them alive. Sable's nose moved toward the mesh, sniffing. Caleb held still. After a moment, she stretched her muzzle forward and touched his knuckles through the wire. It was not affection yet. It was not forgiveness. It was recognition. Dr. Carter turned away for a second, pretending to check the chart. Caleb kept his hand where it was, eyes lowered. I am sorry, he whispered. The words were for Sable. For Ryan. For the radio call. For every place in his life where procedure had survived, but peace had not. Sable exhaled against his fingers. The warmth of it was small, but it reached him. Later that morning, Deputy Noah Bennett arrived with snow on his boots and concern tucked beneath a calm face. He was a broad, pale-skinned man in his mid-40s, with a trimmed gray beard and the patient eyes of someone who had spent years listening before speaking. He had served in the Army before joining the county sheriff's office, and when he heard the words former K-9, frozen bridge, and newborn pups, he came himself instead of sending a report number. Caleb walked him through the discovery without drama. The chain, the duffel bag, the photograph, the hollow beneath the concrete. Deputy Bennett wrote slowly, his pen moving across the small notepad as if each detail deserved respect. I will check the bridge when the road crews clear more snow, he said. See if there is anything else down there. Camera footage from nearby roads, if any. But with last night's storm, I will be honest. We may not find whoever left her. Caleb looked through the kennel window at Sable. Maybe finding her matters more right now. The deputy nodded. Sometimes justice starts with making sure the living are safe. Dr. Carter stood beside them, arms folded, tired but firm. She is not going anywhere for several days. The puppies either. After that, she will need a quiet place. No shelter environment. Not after this. The words settled into the room before anyone said what they meant. Caleb felt them waiting on him. He thought of his house outside town, too. Quiet since he had returned from his last deployment. A narrow porch. A fenced acre. A spare room filled with boxes he never opened because memory lived inside them. He thought of the nights he had spent listening to wine move over empty fields, telling himself peace was supposed to feel lonely at first. Sable shifted in the kennel and laid her head around the puppies, curving herself into a wall between them and the world. Caleb looked at Dr. Carter. When she is ready, he said, she can come home with me. Dr. Carter studied him carefully, not doubting his kindness, only measuring the weight of the promise. All four of them. Caleb looked at the smallest puppy, still breathing beneath the lamp. Then at Sable, who had once carried Ryan's final command through 6 years of silence and snow. His voice did not rise. It did not need to. All four, he said. Sable's eyes opened at the sound, and for the first time since the bridge, her tail moved once against the blanket, faint as a whisper, but enough to make the whole room go still. For 3 days, the little clinic became the center of Caleb Walker's world. He went home only once, and even then it was not to rest. He drove through slushy morning roads to the small house he kept on the edge of town, a one-story place with white siding, a narrow porch, and a fenced acre that had spent years waiting for laughter. The house sat beneath a line of bare cottonwoods, with the Big Belt Mountains rising blue and quiet in the distance. Inside, everything was neat because no one had ever been there long enough to make it messy. His boots stood by the door in a perfect line. His coffee mug stayed in the same cabinet. The guest room held old storage boxes sealed with tape and dust, each one labeled in black marker with words like deployment, winter gear, and unit photos, though Caleb had not opened them in years. That morning, he opened them. He found clean blankets, a portable kennel folded flat, a wool throw his mother had mailed him one Christmas, and a small brass frame with a Marine Corps emblem pressed into the corner. At the bottom of one box, wrapped in tissue paper, lay a set of old radio transcripts from the winter training operation 6 years earlier. Caleb had kept them for reasons he never admitted. Proof, maybe. Punishment, more likely. He unfolded the top sheet and saw Ryan Hale's name in the typed report, plain and black against the white paper. Weather interference. Signal disruption. Recovery delayed. Missing canine asset. The words were clean. Too clean. They did not carry the sound of static. They did not carry the way a voice could thin out before disappearing. Caleb sat on the edge of the bed with the paper in his hand, listening to the heater kick on beneath the floor. He thought of Sable under the bridge, not as an asset, not as a line in a file, but as a mother with ice on her coat and 3 lives hidden in the dark. Missing canine asset. He folded the transcript slowly and placed it back in the box. No more, he said to the empty room. When he returned to foster veterinary care, Dr. Carter was standing near the recovery kennel with a softer expression than he had seen on her yet. She ate, she said before Caleb could ask. Not much, but enough to mean she wants tomorrow. Caleb stepped closer. Sable lay on her side, the puppies tucked against her, all 3 alive beneath the warm yellow lamp. The smallest one had become the clinic's silent measure of hope. Dr. Carter had started calling him Little Miles because every inch he gained felt like distance crossed. The darker pup was steadier, a round-bellied little male with a pale chin who pushed his way toward warmth with surprising determination. The Sable pup, a female, slept with one paw resting on Sable's leg as if anchoring herself to her mother. Caleb watched them for a long moment. They need names, Dr. Carter said. Caleb looked at her. Already. Names help people remember they are not cases. She glanced toward Sable. They are souls. Caleb crouched near the kennel. Sable opened her eyes. They were clearer now, still tired, still guarded, but no longer clouded by the cold. Ryan called her Sable, Caleb said. That stays. Dr. Carter nodded. And the puppies? Caleb did not answer quickly. Naming felt like accepting responsibility out loud. His gaze moved to the little male with the pale chin. That one is Scout. Then to the female with her paw on Sable. Grace. Last, to the smallest, still breathing in careful shallow pulls. Caleb swallowed. Miles works. Dr. Carter smiled faintly. Scout, Grace, and Miles. Sable's tail shifted once against the blanket. Not quite a wag, but enough. Deputy Bennett returned that afternoon with a paper evidence bag and snow melting on the shoulders of his brown uniform jacket. His face told Caleb there was news, but not the kind that closed a door. Road crew cleared access under the bridge, he said. We found the anchor point, the broken scraps from that duffel, and some tire tracks near the old service turnout. Too much snowmelt to read them clean. No camera on that stretch. Caleb listened without interrupting. Sable watched the deputy from the kennel, calm but alert, her nose lifted toward the unfamiliar scent. Bennett held up the evidence bag. Inside was a small, rusted metal tag shaped like a shield. This was caught in the canvas. Not hers. Looks like an old facility tag from a private kennel that shut down years back, maybe 2 counties over. I will follow it. Dr. Carter folded her arms. Do you think she was kept there? I think she passed through more hands than she should have. Bennett's voice stayed gentle, but his eyes were tired. I also think somebody knew she would not leave those pups. That is why they chained her where she could see them. The room went still. Caleb looked at Sable, then at the puppies asleep against her. He did not let anger rise into his voice. He had learned that rage burned fast and left little useful behind. Then we make sure that is the last place anyone leaves her. Bennett met his eyes and nodded. That part I can help with. That evening, after the deputy left and Dr. Carter went to check medicine inventory, Caleb stayed beside Sable's kennel while the sky outside turned lavender over the snowbanks. The clinic was quiet except for the soft sounds of animals resting in the back and the faint hum of the warming lamp. Caleb opened the kennel door for the first time under Dr. Carter's permission and sat cross-legged on the floor a few feet away. He did not reach in. He did not ask for trust. He simply sat there, present and still. After several minutes, Sable lifted her head. Her eyes rested on him, studying the shape of his patients. Then, with great care, she nudged Grace closer to her belly, checked Scout with her nose, and rested her muzzle beside Miles. Only after that did she stretch one paw forward until it touched the edge of Caleb's boot. It was such a small gesture that no one passing by would have understood it. But Caleb did. Under a frozen bridge, she had asked him to follow. In the clinic, she had allowed him to stay. Now, in the blue hush of evening, she was telling him where the line of family began. The fourth morning came with clear light. Not warm light, not yet, but honest light, the kind that turned the snowbanks silver and made every roof in town look newly forgiven. Foster veterinary care opened at 8, though Caleb had been there since sunrise, sweeping the front walk without being asked while Dr. Carter checked Sable's temperature and weighed the puppies one by one. Scout had gained 2 ounces. Grace had gained 1.5. Little Miles, who had seemed no heavier than a prayer on the first night, had gained enough for Dr. Carter to write the number down twice and smile at the paper as if it had spoken. "He is stubborn," she said. Caleb looked through the recovery room window at the tiny pup nosing blindly against Sable's fur. "He comes by it honestly." Sable was stronger, too. She could stand for short moments now, thin legs braced carefully beneath her, head lifted with that quiet working dog dignity no chain had managed to take from her. She still watched doors. She still counted footsteps. When strangers entered the clinic, her body tightened until Caleb spoke. Then she would settle, not completely, but enough to show she had begun sorting the world into dangers and safe things. Caleb had become one of the safe things. He did not say that out loud. He was afraid speaking it too soon might break it. Near noon, Deputy Bennett returned with a manila folder tucked beneath one arm and a paper cup of diner coffee in the other. Snowmelt darkened the hem of his uniform pants. His face carried the weight of news gathered from old records and reluctant phone calls. Dr. Carter met him in the front room, and Caleb joined them after making sure Sable could still see him through the open doorway. "I tracked the facility tag," Bennett said. "It belonged to a private kennel outside Deer Lodge. Closed 18 months ago after inspection problems and unpaid taxes. Before that, they took in retired working dogs, overflow rescues, and animals transferred from smaller shelters." Caleb's eyes narrowed slightly. Was Sable there? Bennett opened the folder. Not under her name. But there was a female German shepherd listed as unclaimed, Sable coat, no public adoption photo, brought in by an unknown party about a year after Corporal Hale's accident. The record says she was transferred out to a private foster. Dr. Carter's mouth tightened. "Name. That is where it gets thin." Bennett tapped the paper. The foster address was incomplete. Phone number disconnected. Whoever filled it out either made a mistake or did not want follow-up. Caleb looked toward the recovery room. Sable was awake, head resting near Grace, eyes fixed on him from across the clinic. So for years, she was moving through shadows. Bennett nodded. "Looks that way." He hesitated, then added, "There is one more thing. Ryan Hale's sister is alive. Lives in Missoula. Her name is Anna Hale. I reached her this morning." The name changed the air. Caleb felt it before he understood why. Family. Not the kind under a blanket beneath a warming lamp. The kind still waiting somewhere with a grief that had never been given all its pieces. "Does she know about Sable?" Caleb asked. She thought Sable had been placed through official channels years ago. She never knew the dog went missing. Dr. Carter closed her eyes briefly. Caleb turned away, not from anger, but from the ache of it. All those years, one sister believing a promise had been kept, one dog carrying that promise alone, one Marine hearing the last words and never knowing where they were meant to land. Bennett's voice softened. "Anna is driving down tomorrow if the pass stays open." She asked if she could see Sable. Caleb looked back through the doorway. Sable's ears had risen. Maybe it was the tone. Maybe it was the name Hale. Maybe some memories lived deeper than language. She should, Caleb said. That night, Caleb did not sleep much. He sat at home at the kitchen table with Ryan's old transcript in front of him and the photograph from the bridge propped against a salt shaker. Dr. Carter had made a copy and allowed him to take the original home for safekeeping until Anna arrived. The house felt different now, though Sable and the puppies were still at the clinic. There were blankets washed and folded in the laundry room, a new bag of puppy formula on the counter, a soft bed near the wood stove. His quiet had begun making room for them before they had even crossed the threshold. Caleb read the transcript once more, slower this time, not as a man punishing himself, but as a man finally willing to hear what was actually there. Ryan Hale's final transmission had been fragmented. Position uncertain. Weather closing in. Sable separated from lead. Do not leave her. Repeat, do not leave her. Caleb pressed his fingers against the page. For 6 years, he had remembered only failure. But now another truth stood beside it. Ryan's last command had not died in the storm. It had traveled through a lost dog, through years of confusion, through a frozen bridge, through a mother refusing to abandon her pups, until Caleb finally heard it clearly. The next afternoon, Anna Hale arrived just after 2. She was in her early 30s, pale-skinned, with light brown hair tucked beneath a navy knit cap and eyes that looked startlingly like the young Marine in the damaged photograph. She stepped into the clinic holding a small cardboard box against her chest. Caleb stood when she entered. For a moment, neither of them spoke. There were some introductions too heavy for ordinary words. Dr. Carter led them quietly to the recovery room. Sable was lying with the puppies when Anna appeared in the doorway. At first, the dog only lifted her head. Then the scent reached her. Her body went still, not tense, still in the way a church goes still before a hymn begins. Anna covered her mouth with one hand. Sable. The dog pushed herself up, unsteady but determined. Caleb moved as if to help, then stopped. This was not his moment to carry. Sable took one step, then another. Her paws slipped on the blanket, but she kept coming until she reached the open kennel door. Anna knelt on the floor, tears already moving silently down her face. She opened the cardboard box with shaking hands and pulled out an old green collar, faded and worn smooth along the edges. A small brass tag hung from it. Sable. Ryan had kept it at home before the accident, Anna whispered, in case she ever retired with us. Sable lowered her nose to the collar. She breathed in once, and the years seemed to fall away. Her tail moved, slow and trembling. Then she pressed her head into Anna's chest with a soft sound so full of recognition that Caleb had to look down. Anna wrapped her arms around the shepherd, careful of the healing places, and cried into her fur without shame. Sable stood there, thin and tired and alive, accepting the grief, giving back what comfort she could. Behind them, Scout squeaked from the blanket. Grace answered with a tiny sigh. Miles wriggled closer to the warmth. Sable turned her head at once, checking them, and Anna saw the puppies for the first time. Her hand flew to her heart. "Oh, Sable," she whispered. "You kept your family." Caleb stood near the doorway, silent, feeling the old guilt inside him shift again. Not vanish. Maybe it never would. But it was no longer a closed room. Light had entered. Anna looked up at him, still holding Sable's collar. "Deputy Bennett told me you found her." Caleb nodded once. "She found me first." Anna studied him with Ryan's eyes. And somehow that was the hardest mercy of all. "Then my brother's last prayer made it to the right person," she said. Caleb could not answer. Sable leaned against Anna, her amber eyes resting on Caleb over the woman's shoulder. And in that quiet triangle between the living, the lost, and the ones still breathing, Caleb understood that redemption did not always arrive as a pardon. Sometimes it arrived as a responsibility you were finally ready to keep. Anna stayed for nearly an hour, kneeling on the clinic floor with Sable's old collar in her lap and one hand resting lightly against the shepherd's shoulder. She did not try to take Sable home. She did not ask for something the dog was not ready to give. She seemed to understand, in the quiet way grief teaches people, that love is not always possession. Sometimes love is standing close enough to be remembered and far enough not to frighten what has survived without you. Sable leaned into her more than once, then turned back every few minutes to count the puppies. Scout, Grace, and Miles slept beneath the warming lamp, their bodies rounder now, their breaths steadier, their tiny paws twitching as if they were already dreaming of grass they had never seen. Dr. Carter stood near the doorway with folded arms, watching with the tired relief of someone who had fought through the worst night and finally seen morning answer. Caleb remained by the wall, silent, his hands resting at his sides. He had learned, in war and in healing, that some moments did not need him at the center. This one belonged to Ryan's sister, to Sable, and to a promise that had taken 6 years to find its way home. When Anna finally rose, she wiped her face with the sleeve of her coat and looked at Caleb. "Ryan would have liked you," she said. Caleb shook his head slightly. "He did not know me." "Maybe not," Anna said. "But he knew the kind of man who stops in a storm." The words landed gently, but they stayed. Caleb did not know what to do with grace when it came without accusation. He had spent years preparing answers for blame, explanations for silence, defenses against memory. He had not prepared for forgiveness that arrived quietly, holding a faded collar and smelling faintly of snow. Anna opened the cardboard box again and took out a second item, a small cloth pouch tied with a worn string. "This was Ryan's spare dog tag," she said. "Our mother kept it after the service. I brought it because I thought Sable should have something of his nearby. But now I think maybe you should keep it until she comes home." Caleb looked at the pouch as if it weighed more than metal. "Anna, I do not know if I deserve that." Her eyes softened. "Maybe deserving is not the point." She placed it in his palm and closed his fingers around it. The tag was cold at first, then warmed against his skin. Behind them, Sable watched the exchange. Her amber eyes were steady, not confused, not restless. Caleb had the strange feeling that she understood enough. Not the words, maybe, but the shape of the promise passing from one hand to another. After Anna left, the clinic felt different. Not emptier. Settled. Outside, the late afternoon sun broke through the clouds for the first time in days, spilling pale gold across the snowdrifts and turning the parking lot into a field of soft light. Dr. Carter checked the puppies again, then looked at Caleb over the rims of her reading glasses. If she keeps improving, they can leave in 2 more days. She will need follow-up visits, medication, careful feeding, and quiet. The puppies will need round-the-clock attention. Caleb nodded. "I know. I mean real attention, Caleb. Every 2 hours if needed. Warmth. Weight checks. No visitors crowding her. No sudden noises. And Sable may have setbacks. Fear does not vanish because the door opens." Caleb looked through the kennel door at the shepherd and her pups. "Neither does loyalty." Dr. Carter's expression softened. "No, it does not." That evening, Caleb drove home under a sky washed clean by the storm. The roads were still rough in places, bordered by plowed walls of snow almost 3 feet high, but the clouds had lifted enough to reveal stars over the dark line of the mountains. In the passenger seat sat the cloth pouch with Ryan's dog tag, the old photograph, and a list from Dr. Carter written in neat blue ink. Puppy formula, heating pad, soft towels, scale, gentle shampoo later, not now. Patience, underlined twice. Caleb stopped at the 24-hour farm and feed store before it closed. The young cashier looked half asleep until she saw his cart stacked with blankets, puppy pads, small bowls, cleaning supplies, and the softest dog bed he could find. "New dog?" she asked. Caleb paused. Through the front windows, he could see his truck under the parking lot lights, salt and snow crusted along the tires. "Family," he said. The cashier smiled without understanding the whole story, which was fine. Some truths did not need witnesses to become real. Back home, Caleb worked late into the night. He moved the boxes from the spare room into the garage. He laid clean blankets across the floor. He set up the portable kennel near the heating vent but away from drafts. He placed the large dog bed beside it, and then moved it twice, trying to imagine where Sable would feel safest, where she could see the door, the windows, and her puppies all at once. He filled a low drawer with towels and medicine supplies. He tested the warming pad with his palm. He swept the porch. He checked the fence line with a flashlight, walking all the way around the acre while the snow squeaked beneath his boots. The night smelled of pine, cold earth, and distant wood smoke. At the back fence, he stopped and looked toward the mountains, dark and still beneath the stars. For the first time in years, the quiet around his house did not feel like punishment. It felt like a room being prepared before guests arrived. Near midnight, Caleb returned inside and set Ryan's dog tag on the small table beside the empty dog bed. The metal caught the lamplight with a muted glow. He stood there for a while, listening to the hum of the heater and the soft ticking of the kitchen clock. Then he spoke into the stillness, not loudly, not formally, just as one Marine speaking to another across distance, weather, and time. I could not answer you then, he said. But I heard you now. The house did not answer. It did not need to. 2 mornings later, Dr. Carter called just after sunrise. Caleb answered before the second ring. Her voice was calm, but there was warmth beneath it. They are ready. Caleb closed his eyes. In the background, faint through the phone, he heard a puppy squeak. Then another. Then, low and steady, Sable's breath. Caleb picked up his keys, the list, the collar Anna had left, and the promise that no longer felt like a burden. It felt like a road opening beneath clear light. Caleb arrived at Foster Veterinary Care just as the sun lifted over the snowfields east of town, turning the road gold at the edges and making the whole. Morning looked softer than it was. The air was still cold enough to sting his lungs, but it no longer felt cruel. It smelled of thawing pine, road salt, and coffee from the diner across the street. He parked close to the clinic door and sat for a second with both hands resting on the wheel, not because he was unsure, but because he understood that some thresholds deserved silence before crossing. Inside, Dr. Carter had everything ready. Scout, Grace, and Miles were tucked inside a padded carrier lined with warm towels, each one fuller than the night they had been found, each one making small blind movements toward the scent of milk and mother. Sable stood beside the examination table on a non-slip mat, thin but steady, wearing the old green collar Anna had brought. The brass tag lay against her chest like a piece of time returned to its rightful place. When Caleb entered, Sable looked up. Her tail moved once, then again, slow and careful, as if joy itself needed permission after all she had endured. Caleb crouched near the door and held out his hand. Sable crossed the room in 4 measured steps and pressed her muzzle into his palm. No wire between them now. No chain. No frozen concrete. Just breath, warmth, and trust arriving with tired paws. Ready to go home? Caleb asked. Sable looked back at the carrier. Dr. Carter smiled. She will not leave without them. Caleb nodded. I would be disappointed if she did. The ride home was quiet. Sable lay across the back seat with her nose near the carrier, lifting her head every time one of the puppies squeaked. Caleb drove slowly, avoiding potholes, taking the long way around the steep hill because the road there still held ice in the shadows. He spoke to her now and then, not because she needed words, but because the truck no longer felt right in silence. He told her about the house, the fenced yard, the porch that caught the afternoon sun, the old cottonwoods that dropped leaves like copper in the fall. Sable listened with half-closed eyes, her ears shifting at the sound of his voice. When they turned into the driveway, the house stood waiting beneath a bright winter sky. Caleb carried the puppies in first, then came back for Sable, but she was already standing at the open truck door. She tested the ground with one paw, then the next. Caleb stayed close, but did not lift her. This was her crossing to make. Step by step, she moved up the cleared path, past the porch rail dusted with snow, through the front door, and into the warm room Caleb had prepared. She stopped at the threshold, taking in every scent. Clean blankets, wood polish, new bowls, the faint metal trace of Ryan's dog tag on the table. Her body went very still. Caleb watched as her nose lifted toward it. He had placed the tag beside the empty bed, not as decoration, not as grief, but as witness. Sable walked to the table, sniffed the tag, and lowered her head. For a moment, the years seemed to pass through her in one quiet breath. Then Scout squeaked from the carrier, and she turned at once, returning to the living. Caleb set the puppies on the fleece pad near the bed. Sable circled them twice, careful and slow, then lay down with a sigh so deep it seemed to leave the whole house warmer. Grace found her first. Scout followed with his stubborn little push. Miles, smallest and steady now, wriggled between them until his head rested beneath Sable's chin. Caleb sat on the floor several feet away and watched the family settle into a peace no one could have promised under that bridge. Outside, snow began sliding from the roof in soft thumps. Sunlight reached through the window and laid a bright square across the floor, touching Sable's paws, then the puppies, then Caleb's boots. He had imagined homecoming before, but never like this. Not with a rescued K9 breathing beside a dog tag. Not with 3 newborns turning an empty room into a nursery. Not with his own heart, so long disciplined into quiet, learning the sound of being needed again. Over the next weeks, winter loosened its grip. Dr. Carter visited twice, Then Caleb brought the family to the clinic for checkups in a laundry basket lined with towels because Scout had learned to climb out of the carrier. Anna came one Sunday with a framed photograph of Ryan and Sable from Better Days, and Caleb placed it on the mantel near the dog tag. Deputy Bennett continued his search into the old kennel records, and though answers came slowly, the living kept growing. Sable gained weight. Her coat began to shine. Grace opened her eyes first, blue and cloudy, staring at the world as if it had been waiting for her. Scout barked at his own reflection in a mixing bowl. Miles took the longest to stand, but when he did, Sable touched her nose to his back and stayed there until he found his balance. Caleb laughed more than he meant to. Sometimes the sound surprised him. Sometimes it surprised Sable, too, and she would look at him with calm amber eyes as if to say she had known it was still in him somewhere. In early spring, when the creek thawed and the grass began pushing through the mud in brave green threads, Caleb drove back to the old bridge. He did not go alone. Sable sat in the passenger seat, stronger now, the green collar around her neck, while the puppies slept in a crate behind them, too young to understand why the place mattered. The bridge looked smaller in daylight. Rusted beams, concrete pillars, water moving clear over stones. No storm, no cry, no darkness thick enough to hide what should have been seen. Caleb walked beneath the span carrying a small wooden sign he had made by hand. Deputy Bennett had removed the old chain weeks earlier, but Caleb still found the anchor mark in the concrete, a dark circle where cold metal had once held too much power. He knelt there and fixed the sign to a post near the service path. For words, painted in deep blue, no soul left behind. Sable stood beside him while he worked, watching the creek. When he finished, Caleb took Ryan's spare dog tag from his pocket and held it for a moment in his closed hand. Then he did not bury it, and he did not leave it behind. He clipped it gently to Sable's collar beside her own brass tag. It belonged with the promise that had survived. The tags touched with a soft sound, small as a bell heard from far away. Sable leaned against Caleb's leg. He rested his hand on her head. Behind them, one of the puppies gave a sleepy little yelp from the truck, and Sable looked back immediately, alert, devoted, whole. Caleb smiled through the ache in his chest. Some stories do not end by erasing the cold places. They end when someone returns to them carrying warmth. And under that old bridge, where a forgotten cry had once risen into the snow, a marine